There are moments that arrive without warning. Not the dramatic ones, not the moments that announce themselves with music and significance. The other kind, the ordinary-seeming moments that are actually everything. The ones that look like Tuesday mornings and turn out to be the specific hinge on which a life turns. My roommate forgot his towel. That was the beginning of everything. Not because of what happened in the 30 seconds he stood in the hallway between the bathroom and his room, which was brief and quickly resolved, and which neither of us made into more than it was in the physical sense, but because of what came after it. Because of the conversation that the small absurd moment opened, the way a crack opens in a wall that has been solid for 9 months, not dramatically, not all at once, just enough to let the light in. He was standing in the hallway. He was exactly the version of himself that I had been carefully not looking at for 9 months. He said with the specific resigned humor of a person who has already accepted that the universe has made a decision, "Well, this is embarrassing." And I said with the specific forced casualness of someone who had been managing something for 9 months and was on the verge of not managing it anymore, "I'll get you a towel." And I got him a towel. And he took it. And he said thank you. And then he went into his room and closed the door. And I stood in the hallway. And I thought, 9 months. 9 months of this apartment and this person and the thing I have been calling friendship and managing as friendship, and we have just arrived at the specific comedy of a moment that I am going to be thinking about for the rest of my life. My name is Kai. His name was Jordan. And the towel was the beginning of us finally being honest. This is that story. The apartment was in the Capitol Hill neighborhood of Seattle. 3rd floor, 2 bedrooms, the specific quality of a pre-war building that had been renovated enough to be functional and not so much that it had lost the character of its bones. I had been in Seattle for 2 years. Originally from Hawaii, Oahu, the leeward side, a family that had been there for 4 generations on my father's side, Hawaiian Japanese, the specific combination of cultures that had produced the person I was and that I was still in the process of understanding fully. I was 26. I worked in environmental consulting, a small firm that did sustainability assessments for development projects in the Pacific Northwest. The work was meaningful and the pay was adequate, and the city of Seattle in its particular Pacific Northwest gray-green way had become, in 2 years, something close to home. Jordan had moved in 9 months ago. I had posted the roommate listing in September. He had answered within an hour, which should have told me something about the specific urgency of his situation, though at the time I had simply thought, responsive. He was 28, a musician, not a working musician in the commercial sense, though he had been that briefly, but a music teacher. He taught guitar and theory at a community music school in the neighborhood, and he played his own compositions on the weekend at a coffee shop on 15th that paid him in coffee and the specific satisfaction of an audience that was choosing to listen rather than being subjected. He moved in with 2 guitars, 3 boxes of books, a very specific collection of plants that he negotiated onto the south-facing windowsill, and the specific quality of someone who was comfortable in small spaces because he had been in them before. He was also, I understood within 2 weeks, gay. This was not information I had asked for. It was information that arrived in the natural way that information arrives in small apartments, through the book spines visible on the shelf, through the music he played that included a specific canon if you knew where to look, through the occasional phone call in his room, the cadence of which communicated something I recognized because I recognized the territory. I was gay too. I had been out since I was 20, comfortably, completely, in the specific way of someone who had grown up in a family that had made space for it, and in a community that had not always made space for it and had found, over 6 years, the specific equilibrium of someone who knew who they were and had stopped requiring the world's permission. 2 gay men in a 2-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill. The mathematics of this situation should have been simple. It was not simple. Because Jordan was Jordan, specifically, entirely, with the quality of someone who moved through the world at a frequency I had never encountered in quite this way. He played music the way some people breathe, with the unconscious necessity of something that was not optional. He thought about things carefully and spoke about them honestly, and had the specific quality of someone for whom surface-level conversation was physically uncomfortable. He was also the most guarded person I had ever shared a space with. Not cold, not hostile, the other kind of guarded. The kind that is built from real experience of real consequences and that is maintained with the specific discipline of someone who has learned that certain things should be held close until they are safe to release. I had been managing my awareness of him for 9 months. The towel was the end of the managing. Let me describe the 9 months accurately. We were good roommates, functionally, practically, in all the ways that roommate compatibility is usually measured. We had established routines. I cooked on Tuesdays and Thursdays, he cooked on Mondays and Wednesdays, Fridays were each of our own. We maintained the shared spaces with the natural mutual consideration of two people who respected each other's presence. We had an understanding about the music. He could play after 10 p.m. only if it was guitar, no amplification, and I could listen from my room and pretend I wasn't. I always listened. Not because I was trying to, because his playing was the kind that was impossible to be in a building with and not hear, not in the acoustic sense but in the other sense. The sense of something that was communicating what conversation did not always. We talked about the neighborhood and the news and the things that our respective days produced. About music, he had opinions about music that were specific and informed and occasionally wrong in the way that people who love something are wrong, with the wrongness that comes from caring too much about a thing rather than too little. He knew about my work. I knew about his students not by name but by the characters they had become in his stories. The 13-year-old who was going to be extraordinary. The adult beginner who was terrified of the instrument and had been coming for 6 months and last week had produced, for the first time, something that was actually music. We had dinner together most nights, not formally, not with the setup and the candles and the performance of occasion. The casual dinners of two people who had both cooked and both needed to eat and the kitchen table was there. And in 9 months of this proximity, the dinners and the music and the conversations and the routines, I had become, without planning to and without nomming it, more invested in Jordan Abernathy than I had been in any person I had lived with in 6 years of apartment sharing. I did not say this. He did not say whatever the equivalent was on his side. We were both very good at not saying things. The towel changed this. A Tuesday. I had a late start. The project I was coordinating had hit a bureaucratic delay and my morning meeting had been pushed to 11. I was at the kitchen table with my coffee and my laptop at 8:15, which was unusual. I was normally out of the apartment by 8. Jordan had a morning student at 9. He was up. I could hear the specific morning sounds of him in the bathroom, which I knew because 9 months had taught me the sounds of his mornings the way years of living somewhere teaches you the sound of the building. At 8:30 I heard the bathroom door open. I heard footsteps stop. I heard, "Oh." I looked up. He was in the hallway. Wet hair. Holding his shampoo. No towel. He looked at me at the kitchen table. I looked at him. 3 seconds. "Well," he said, "this is embarrassing." I was already moving, standing, going to the linen closet in the hallway, pulling out a towel, not looking, or looking at the shelf and not elsewhere, the specific discipline of someone who was being a good roommate. "Here," I said. I held out the towel without turning fully toward him. He took it. "Thank you," he said. He went to his room. I went back to the kitchen table. I sat down. I held my coffee. The coffee was still warm. I held it for a very long time. He came out of his room 20 minutes later dressed for his teaching day. He looked at me at the kitchen table. I looked at my laptop. He went to the coffee maker and poured a cup. He stood at the counter. He said, "You didn't have to get up so fast," and I said, "You needed a towel," and he said, "I know, but you could have just pointed at the closet. You didn't have to get up." And I held my laptop and I thought, I got up because the alternative was sitting here while you figured it out, and the sitting here while you figured it out was not something I was capable of. And I said I was already up. And he said, "Kai," and something in the way he said my name was different from the way he had said it in 9 months. Not the roommate version of my name, the other version, the one I had not heard before, the one that said, "I know something, I am asking if you know it too." And I said, "Yeah," and he said, "We should probably talk," and I said, "Probably." And he said, "Tonight," and I said, "Tonight," and he nodded. And he picked up his guitar case and his bag and he left for his 9 o'clock student. And I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and I thought, 9 months. We needed a forgotten towel to get here. The universe apparently has the specific sense of humor of a very patient friend who has been waiting for you to stop being an idiot. He had students until 4. I had my meeting at 11 and then the specific productive anxiety of a Tuesday that was going to end in a conversation I had been not having for 9 months. I called my best friend Meal at noon. Meal was from the same part of Oahu as me. We had grown up 4 streets from each other, had been friends since the 3rd grade, had survived each other's adolescences and young adulthoods with the specific durability of a friendship that was as close to family as friendship could get. Something happened this morning, I said. Tell me, she said. I told her, the towel, the hallway, the 3 seconds, the towel retrieval, the conversation at the coffee maker. Meal was quiet for a moment. Then 9 months. 9 months, I said. And it took a forgotten towel, she said. Yes, I said. The universe has a sense of humor, she said. I thought that too, I said. What happens tonight, she said. He said we should talk, I said, and I said tonight. What do you want to happen, she said. I held my phone. I want to stop managing it, I said. I want to say the thing and I want to know what he says back. What are you afraid of, she said. That it will change the apartment, I said. That it will make something complicated that is currently good. The apartment is good, we work well together. If I say the thing and it goes wrong. It won't go wrong, she said. You don't know that, I said. I know you, she said. And I know you well enough to know that you have been managing something for 9 months that would have been managing itself if both of you weren't so careful about everything. She paused. Say the thing, Kai. The careful version of your life is very clean. It is also not the whole of your life. I held my phone. When did you get this wise, I said. I've always been this wise, she said. You've been too careful to hear it. He was home at 4:15. I was at the kitchen table, still, different laptop work but the same table, the specific decision to be in the shared space rather than retreating to my room, which was the careful version. He put his guitar case down, he looked at me, he said hi. Hi, I said. He made tea, he brought me a cup without asking, he sat across from me. We looked at each other. Do you want to start, he said. No, I said. Neither do I, he said. But one of us has to, I said. Yes, he said. We held our cups. Jordan, I said. Yeah, he said. I am going to say something, I said, and I need you to not let me back out of it. Okay, he said. Because I have a history of backing out of the real version of things when the real version feels risky, I said. I have managed my way through a lot of situations by producing a slightly less true version of what I actually feel, and I am tired of the managed version. He held his cup. Okay, he said. I started. In the 9 months since you moved in, I stopped. Kai, he said. I'm getting there, I said. I know, he said, I'm not rushing. I held my cup. I have been in love with you, I said, since approximately week 3, when you played that specific piece on Sunday night, the one in E minor that you never told me the name of, and I was in my room listening and I thought, I am in serious trouble. He held his cup. He was very still. The E minor piece, he said. Yes, I said. You could hear it from your room, he said. I could always hear you from my room, I said. The walls are not that thick. He held his cup. I always thought you were asleep by then, he said. I was never asleep by then, I said. I was listening. He held his cup. Kai, he said. Yeah. I knew you were listening, he said. I stared at him. What, I said. I play differently when I know someone is listening, he said, and I always played differently on Sunday nights. He held his cup. I was playing for you, I just didn't say so. I held my cup. 9 months, I said. 9 months, he said. You were playing for me for 9 months, I said. Yes, he said. And I was listening for 9 months, I said. Yes, he said. We held our cups. We are both very stupid, I said. He almost smiled. We are both very careful, he said. Is there a difference, I said. He held his cup. Sometimes, he said, when the careful is necessary, sometimes not. He paused. Tell me why you've been careful. I held my cup. Because you are the best thing in my daily life, I said. And the prospect of saying this and getting it wrong and losing the apartment and the dinners and the music and, I stopped. And you, the prospect of losing you felt worse than the prospect of not saying anything. He held his cup. And now, he said. Now a forgotten towel has made the not saying anything feel like the larger loss, I said. He almost laughed. The specific quality of a laugh held back. The towel, he said. Yes, I said. I did not forget it, he said. I stared at him. What, I said. He held his cup. I knew you had a late start today, he said. You mentioned it last week and I thought, he stopped. Jordan, I said. I thought that if I needed something this morning, he said, and I came out of the bathroom without what I needed and you were at the kitchen table, you would get up, because you always get up, because that is the kind of person you are. He held his cup. And if you got up and handed me something and we were in the hallway at 8:30 in the morning in an honest situation, he stopped. You planned it, I said. I facilitated it, he said. The universe had already done the work, I just. You did not forget your towel, I said. No, he said. I held my cup. Jordan Abernathy, I said. Yes, he said. You engineered the towel situation, I said. I created favorable conditions, he said. I held my cup. I did not have a word for what I was, somewhere between astonished and delighted and slightly mortified on behalf of both of us. Why didn't you just say something, I said. He held his cup. He looked at it. Because the careful version of this is the only version I know how to do, he said, and saying something directly, he stopped. I have said things directly before, in situations that felt like this, and the saying of them did not go the way I needed. I held my cup. Tell me, I said. He held his cup. His name was Marcus, he said. 2 years ago I thought we were what I thought we were. We had been in proximity for a long time and the feeling had been building and I said the thing, the direct version. He held the cup. And the direct version did not land the way I needed it to, and what I lost in the losing of it was, he stopped. More than the relationship, I said. Yes, he said, more than the relationship, the friendship that preceded it, the community that surrounded it, the specific safety of a set of people who knew me and the loss of it when the relationship ended badly. I held my cup. So the towel, I said, was a way of opening the door, he said, without walking through it first, of creating a situation where the door might open naturally. He held his cup. I was being careful. The careful version, I said. Yes, he said. Jordan, I said. Yeah. What did you need the direct version to land as, I said. With Marcus, what did you hope for? He held his cup. What I hope for now, he said, that the person on the other side of the saying would say it back. I held my cup. Say what, I said. He held his cup. He held it for a moment. Then he put it down. He looked at me. That they were in love with me. He said, since approximately week 3, when I played something in E minor on a Sunday night and I played it differently because I knew someone was listening. I held my cup. The kitchen table, the Tuesday afternoon, 9 months of careful versions. Jordan, I said. Yeah. I love you, I said. The direct version, no facilitated towel situations, the direct version. He held my gaze. I love you too, he said. Since week 3, since the Sunday night, since I understood that you always got up when someone needed something and I thought that is the person. I held my cup. That is the person, I said. Yes, he said. Because I get up when someone needs a towel, I said. Because you get up, he said, for everything. You got up for the neighbor's packages when she was traveling. You got up to fix the kitchen light at 11 p.m. because I mentioned it was flickering. You got up every time something needed doing because getting up was simply what you did. He held my gaze. I wanted to be something that needed doing. I held my cup. You are not something that needs doing, I said. You are, I stopped. What, he said. The Sunday night music, I said. The E minor piece, what is it called? He held my gaze. I haven't named it yet, he said. Why not, I said. Because it wasn't finished, he said. Is it finished now, I said. He held my gaze. Yes, he said. What are you going to call it, I said. He held my gaze. Kai, he said. The kitchen, the afternoon, 9 months of careful arriving at its destination. I put my cup down. He put his down. And we were simply there, across the kitchen table, not performing, not managing, simply present in the thing that had been building since week 3 and the Sunday night and the E minor piece and the 9 months of listening from the other room. We stayed at the kitchen table for 2 hours, not doing anything except talking, the real version of all the conversations we had been having the managed versions of for 9 months. He told me about Marcus and the community that had been lost with the relationship and the specific fear of saying true things that had grown from that loss. I told him about the relationship 2 years before Seattle, a man named Thomas who I had loved genuinely and who had needed something I could not give him, and the specific way that ending had taught me to be more careful about the territory between professional and personal and friendly and more. We told each other the things that the 9 months had not had room for. The real things, the interior material that you don't share with a roommate but that you share with the person who matters. And at some point it was 7 o'clock and neither of us had eaten, and he stood up and he went to the refrigerator and he said, "I'll cook." And I said, "It's my day." And he said, "I know, let me cook anyway." And I said, "Okay," and he cooked. And I sat at the table and watched him cook in the kitchen that was ours, and I thought, 9 months, and one Tuesday morning, and a towel that was not forgotten, and two people who were done with the careful version. The morning after, he was at the counter when I came out, coffee made. He looked up. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I said. The morning, the kitchen, the specific quality of a day after something significant, not awkward, not the anxious recalibration of something that might have been a mistake, something else. The specific lightness of two people who have been carrying something for 9 months and have put it down. I poured coffee. He was watching me. "What?" I said. "Nothing," he said. He paused. "What?" I said. "I'm glad you had a late start yesterday," he said. I held my coffee. "Me too," I said. We drank our coffee. He had students at 10, I had my usual 9 o'clock. "Tonight," he said. "Yes," I said. "I was thinking," he held his cup, "I want to take you somewhere." "Where?" I said. "The coffee shop on 15th, he said. "My Sunday set. I want you to come, not as the person down the hall who can maybe hear it through the wall, as the person I'm playing for." I held my coffee. "Publicly," I said. "Yes," he said. "You want to take me to your Sunday set," I said. "Tonight is a Wednesday set," he said. "Different audience, smaller, but he held his cup. "I want to play the E minor piece, and I want you in the room when I play it, not in your room, in the room." I held my coffee. "What are you going to call it?" I said. "I told you," he said. "You're going to call it Kai," I said, "in front of an audience." "The title doesn't have to be announced," he said. "But you'll know," I said. "Yes," he said. "And I'll know," I said. "Yes," he said. I held my coffee. "Jordan," I said. "Yeah. I stopped." "Too much," he said. "No," I said, "the opposite." He held his cup. "Good," he said. Wednesday evening. The coffee shop on 15th was a small place with the specific worn quality of a neighborhood institution, the kind that had survived because it was genuinely part of the neighborhood rather than because it was trying to be. 20 tables. A small stage in the back corner that was not a stage so much as an arrangement that communicated, "This is where the music happens." I had walked past it 40 times in 2 years. I had never been inside on a Wednesday. He was setting up when I arrived. He saw me when I came in. The specific quality of seeing someone in your space who you have been in their space, the domestic becoming public, the private becoming shared. "Left side or right?" he said. "Left," I said. He smiled. "Of course," he said, "the small table by the window is the best one." I took the small table by the window. He set up. The set was 40 minutes. He played 6 pieces, some that I recognized from the Sunday nights and the Wednesday nights when I had been in my room listening, and some I had not heard. The 5th piece was the E minor piece. He did not announce a title, he looked at me before he started, just looked, and then he played. I had heard it through the wall for 9 months. I had heard the Sunday version and the Tuesday version and the versions when he was working through something and the versions when he had arrived at something. I had heard it in every iteration. I had never heard it in the same room. It was different. Not technically different, the notes were the same, but the experience of music through a wall and the experience of music in the room with the person making it were not comparable. The way a photograph and a physical presence are not comparable. The photograph communicates, the presence is irreducible. He played the E minor piece and I sat at the left table by the window and I felt 9 months of carefully managed distance dissolve completely. When it ended, there was a moment of quiet before the small Wednesday audience responded. He looked at me. I looked at him. Whatever the audience saw in that exchange, they responded to something. The applause had a quality to it that suggested the music had communicated not just as music but as what it was. After the set, a woman at the next table said to her companion, "I wonder who that is." I held my coffee. Her companion said, "I think whoever it is was in the room." I held my coffee. Jordan came to the table. He sat across from me. "Well," he said. "The piece is called Kai," I said. "Yes," he said. "In front of an audience," I said. "Small audience," he said. "Jordan," I said. "Yeah. I want to say something," I said. "Say it," he said. "I have been in Seattle for 2 years," I said, "and I have been fine, meaningfully employed, connected to the city, in the specific solo life of someone who is doing what they're supposed to be doing and is managing the doing of it." I held my coffee. "And then you moved in, and the managing got harder, and I did not understand why it got harder until week 3 and the Sunday night and the E minor piece, and I filed it under things that would be complicated and kept managing." I held my coffee, and 9 months later a towel that was not actually forgotten opened a door that I should have opened myself a long time ago. I held his gaze. "Thank you for the towel." He held his coffee. He held it for a moment. Then he said, "Thank you for getting up." I held his gaze. "I always get up," I said. "I know," he said. "For you," I said, "especially." He held his coffee. "Kai," he said. "Yeah. Can I take you somewhere?" he said. "You just took me somewhere," I said, "the coffee shop." "Somewhere else," he said. "Where?" I said. "The waterfront," he said. "I walk there sometimes when I need to think. I've been thinking about taking you there for 9 months." I held my coffee. "The waterfront," I said. "Yes," he said. "You've been planning a waterfront walk for 9 months," I said. "I have been imagining taking you to the waterfront for 9 months," he said. "Planning implies I did something about it sooner." I held my coffee. "Jordan," I said. "Yeah. When we get to the waterfront," I said, "I am going to hold your hand." He held his coffee. "Yes," he said. "Just so you know," I said. "I know," he said. "You were prepared for that," I said. "I have been prepared for that for 9 months," he said. The Seattle waterfront at night. The specific quality of it, the water going dark with the evening, the fairy lights, the specific smell of the Pacific Northwest coast that was different from the Hawaiian coast of my childhood in the way that two versions of home are different. Both real, both mine. We walked. He did not put his hand out. Neither did I not immediately. We walked for a block first, and the walking was its own thing, the specific comfortable walking of two people who had been in proximity for 9 months and knew each other's rhythm. At the point where the waterfront path curved toward the ferry terminal, I put my hand in his. He held it. Not dramatically, not with ceremony, the way you hold the hand of someone you have been meaning to hold for 9 months, with the complete naturalness of something that should have happened sooner. We walked. "Meal says I've been too careful," I said at some point. "Who is Meal?" he said. "My best friend," I said, "from home. She has been telling me to say the thing since," I paused, "since whenever I started mentioning you in our calls." "When did you start mentioning me?" he said. "Week 2, I said. He held my hand. "I have a friend named Cameron," he said. "In Chicago. He's been telling me since month 2 to stop facilitating situations and just say something." "Month 2, I said, "and you waited 9 months." "I was careful," he said. "I know," I said, "me too." He held my hand. "We are both very careful people," he said, "who fell in love in week 3. "And waited 9 months," I said. "Yes," he said. "The universe," I said. "Had opinions," he said. I held his hand. "What do we do now?" I said. "About what specifically?" he said. "About the apartment," I said. "About the professional distance. That was the thing holding the careful version in place. We are now significantly unprofessional." He held my hand. "The apartment is the apartment," he said. "The cooking schedule and the shared spaces and the music." He paused. "The music was always for you, it just wasn't acknowledged." "Acknowledged now," I said. "Yes," he said. "In the towel closet," I said. He almost laughed. "I will not be making that mistake again," he said. You mean you will not be creating those favorable conditions again, I said. I don't need favorable conditions anymore, he said. I held his hand. No, I said, neither do I. We walked the waterfront in the specific Seattle night, the fairy lights and the dark water and the smell of the Pacific Northwest coast. His hand in mine, 9 months of careful arriving at the most natural thing. Jordan, I said. Yeah. The E minor piece, I said, now that it has a name and it's finished. Yes, he said. Will you play it differently, I said. He held my hand. He thought about it. No, he said, it will be the same piece, but he paused. But I said. But when I play it now, he said, you'll be in the room. Yes, I said. And I won't have to pretend I don't know you're there, he said. I held his hand. No pretending, I said. No pretending, he said. A month after the towel in the coffee shop in the waterfront. The apartment was the apartment. The same rooms, the same cooking schedule, the same plants on the south-facing windowsill. The walls were as thin as they had always been and his music carried through them the way it always had. But the Sunday nights were different. He still played after 10, still guitar, still no amplification, still the specific music of someone for whom playing was as necessary as breathing. But on Sunday nights when the music started, I did not listen from my room. I came to the living room. I sat on the couch. He sat in the chair he always used with his guitar and the lamp on the side table that produced the specific warm light of a space that had been arranged for music. And he played. Not for the wall, for the room. For me. The October Sunday nights, the music that had a name now, the room that was inhabited by both of us together rather than separately. He played the E minor piece. He looked at me when he played it. I looked at him. The specific quality of two people who had been listening through walls for 9 months and were now simply present, in the same room, without the wall. When it ended, I said, better. Better than through the wall, he said. Better than anything, I said. He held the guitar. He looked at me. Kai, he said. Yeah. Come here, he said. I went. I sat on the arm of the chair. He held the guitar. We were close in the way of two people who had been close in proximity for 9 months and were now close in the other sense, the sense that did not require any specific geographic distance. The walls are thin, he said. I know, I said. And on Sunday nights, he said, I played differently. I know, I said. Because you were listening, he said. Yes, I said. And now you're here, he said. Yes, I said. He held the guitar. I have been thinking about something, he said. Tell me, I said. I want to call Cameron, he said, and tell him that I stopped facilitating situations and just said the thing. I held the chair arm. And what happened when you said the thing, I said. He looked at me. Everything I hoped, he said. Good, I said. He's going to say I told you so, he said. Meal already did, I said. He held the guitar. The careful people, he said. Who fell in love in week 3, I said. And waited 9 months, he said. We are still very careful people, I said. Yes, he said, but the careful now has somewhere to put itself. I looked at him. What does that mean, I said. He held the guitar. The care I was putting into the careful version, he said, the specific attention required to manage something for 9 months without saying it, that is a significant amount of attention. He held the guitar. I would like to put that attention somewhere more productive. Such as, I said. He looked at me. You, he said, specifically. I held the chair arm. That's the least careful thing you have ever said, I said. I know, he said. I appreciate it, I said. Good, he said. Meal came to visit. She had been asking since October and I had been saying soon and soon had arrived. She met Jordan on a Thursday evening. She came into the apartment and she looked at him and he looked at her and she looked at me with the expression of someone who was experiencing the specific satisfaction of every prediction being confirmed simultaneously. You're the music, she said to Jordan. I'm Jordan, he said. You're the music he's been talking about for 9 months, she said. He looked at me. You talked about the music, he said. I talked about the apartment, I said. The music was part of the apartment. You talked about the music, Emil said, specifically, in detail, with the specific quality of someone who is trying to talk about something else and cannot. Jordan held his coffee. He looked at me. Month 2, he said. What? I said. You told me you mentioned me to Emil in week 2, he said. She's telling me it was month 2. I held my coffee. Week 2 was the first mention, I said. Month 2 was when it became. Specific, Emil said. Yes, very specific. I held my coffee. Thank you, Emil, I said. You're welcome, she said pleasantly. She looked at Jordan. You play guitar, she said. Yes, he said. He talks about the music you play the way people talk about things that matter to them, she said. Not the way they talk about things that are pleasant, the way they talk about things that they need. Jordan held his coffee. He looked at me. You needed the music, he said. Yes, I said. You could have just knocked on my door, he said, any Sunday night and asked me to play in the living room. I know, I said. Why didn't you, he said. I held my coffee. Because the wall was safer, I said. The wall meant I could listen without having to explain the listening. He held his coffee. The careful version, he said. Yes, I said. Mia looked at both of us. You are both very careful people, she said. It's impressive and also mildly exhausting to witness. We've heard that, I said. From both sides, Jordan said. Mia held her coffee. Well, she said, you found each other anyway. A towel helped, Jordan said. Mia looked at me. The towel, she said. The towel, I said. She looked at Jordan. He told me about the towel, she said. I know, he said. You planned it, she said. I facilitated conditions, he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, good. Good, he said. That you were doing something about it, she said. Even if the something was elaborate, she held her coffee, he was never going to do it from his side, too careful. I know, Jordan said. Hey, I said. Am I wrong, Emil said. I held my coffee. No, I said. The universe needed help, Jordan said. I provided it. Emil held her coffee. She looked at me. This one, she said, this specific one, who plans a towel situation to open a door. Yes, I said. Keep this one, she said. That was the plan, I said. December. The apartment in December was warm in the specific way of old buildings with good radiators. Outside, the Pacific Northwest winter, which was not dramatic in its cold but was sustained in its gray. Inside, the two of us. The cooking schedule had not changed. It was, if anything, more pleasurable than it had been in the 9 months of careful. The domestic intimacy of cooking for someone you love rather than someone you were managing feelings about was its own education. The plants on the south-facing windowsill were thriving. He watered them every morning with the attention of someone who understood that small living things required consistency. The music was different. Or rather, the context of the music was different. He still played after 10 on Sunday nights. I still sat on the couch, he still sat in the chair with the lamp. But the piece he played had a name now. And it grew. He was adding to it, not changing the original but building around it. New sections, new movements, the E minor piece as the center of something larger. What's happening to it? I said one Sunday in December. He held the guitar. It's becoming a suite, he said. A suite, I said. The original piece was one thing, he said, one moment, the 9 months of listening through the wall, he held the guitar. But there are other moments now, the kitchen table, the waterfront, the coffee shop. He held the guitar, the towel. I held the couch cushion. You're writing a piece about the towel, I said. About what the towel opened, he said, which is different. I held the cushion. What is the suite called? I said. He held the guitar. The careful version, he said, and what came after. I held the cushion. Jordan, I said. Yeah. That is, I stopped. Too much, he said. The opposite, I said. He held the guitar. I'll keep the titles private, he said, for the public performances, but we'll know. We'll know, I said. Yes, he said. He played. The December Sunday, the warm apartment, the south-facing plants, the cooking schedule, the careful version and what had come after. I sat on the couch. He sat in the chair, the lamp between us, and the music, the E minor piece and what it had grown into, the suite about a towel and a wall and two careful people who had spent 9 months not saying the thing, filled the apartment. Not through the wall this time. In the room. The real version. The whole of it.